we're dysregulated, we all have different ways to find that regulation.
I don't think it's any surprise that relationships can become really strained after a loss, and specifically a miscarriage.
Because we're all different biologically, that requires different things.
What actually happens to the brain and the body following a traumatic experience like a miscarriage?
And so that kind of naturally puts a wedge in relationships because we're going through the same thing differently.
One of the most painful things about miscarriage can be the relationships, navigating those relationships throughout that journey. And this episode, I'm so excited to chat with Jason VanRuler. He's a therapist and an author, and he is just going to break down like some of the complexities of how relationships can be strained or even grow through this kind of loss. And so we are just so thrilled to have Jason in this resource series. He's just a wealth of knowledge. And so let's dive into this conversation and just hear a little bit about how you can navigate your relationships, both close ones like with your spouse partner and also with your friends, family, extended kind of circle of people. So let's dive in. It's going to be a great conversation. So Jason, I don't think it's any surprise that relationships can become really strained after a loss, and specifically a miscarriage. Could you scientifically, why does this happen? Like, what actually happens to the brain and the body following a traumatic experience like a miscarriage?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're dysregulated. And so when we're dysregulated, we all have different ways to find that regulation. And because we're all different biologically, that requires different things. And so that kind of naturally puts a wedge in relationships because we're going through the same thing differently. And so
Yeah.
the challenge is that we have to acknowledge that we're both going through the loss, but it looks different and our bodies are trying to regulate. And so for some people, that process is a lot easier than for others. Some of us have a great deal of capacity for dysregulation. And
Mhm.
so we just sort of naturally show up and we're like, I can kind of make sense of it and process this at a different speed than somebody else. And so one of the things that people have to understand is just it's different for everyone.
Mhm.
Something I'm asked a lot from people is, well, how long should I grieve, Jason? Like
Yeah.
what is the exact time that, and I always think, oh, I wish I could tell you, I wish I could say it's X amount of months. But here's what anybody who's ever grieved a loss knows to be true is that it's different for everyone.
Mhm.
And so that's true biologically as well.
Sure. Yeah. And I think too, like the relationships with others, but then also just like the relationships with ourselves. Like I know for myself going through my miscarriages, I did not trust my body. I did not trust my own instincts. And so that relationship with myself was even a little bit strained. And I think that's common for women. And then also think of like the partner perspective of like, I can't help her through this. So therefore, what kind of value do I even bring to our relationship? And just like all those doubts start to creep in. And I guess I just want to tell people that's all very normal. But what would you say to someone feeling that way who either doesn't trust themselves, doesn't trust their own body, or someone maybe who's in the support role who feels incapable of being able to serve that person?
Yeah. We in my marriage, we went through several miscarriages. And
Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
I know this struggle well, unfortunately. It's
Yeah.
always one where you're like, I relate, but wish I didn't. And
Yeah.
and so I think what's really helpful is just to understand that some of our deepest wounds and loss, they cause us to question our identity.
Mhm.
And I think when we're in this space talking about this particular type of loss, that's an identity loss. Who
Yeah.
am I now?
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm not a mother, who am I? If I'm not a father, who am I? And
Yeah.
so we just have to have some grace for ourselves and for each other because we're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because what we believed was going to happen or what we believe was going to be true is no longer. And
Yeah.
so it takes a while for us to kind of develop a new normal. And
Mhm.
that's not easy to predict how long that will take. But what's true is that it'll go faster if we can give ourselves grace and compassion along the way.
Yeah. I always say my miscarriage split me. There's a before and an after. Like my life was split, my identity was split. And I think that it's a total identity crisis. And so I think when anytime you're going through an identity crisis, it's a lot to process. And this is no different. And then you are compounding on, the reality of like what you lost. And so it's not even just like, oh, I got a new job and it's a new identity. It's like, no, it's the loss of a child. It's big and it's going to take time to get through that. Specifically talking about like the relationship between a mom and a dad. I think I really want to just talk to the mom who's listening really quick because I just feel like sometimes it feels like our men don't have feelings, and that's the furthest from the truth. But there's a dad in our community that shared something with me, and I just want everyone to hear it. And so I'm just going to share a little bit of what he said. So this is a dad who they had two kids, and then he and his wife lost their third baby. And he said this. He said, "I didn't know what it meant to be a dad, or quite honestly, how to even love my first child until she was about a year old. Up until then, I just knew I was supposed to love her. With time, I realized how spectacular fatherhood is and how special that love for your child is. With our next child, I could anticipate what that relationship would be like, so I loved her even before meeting her. It was the same with our third child. I loved them immediately, and when we had the miscarriage, I grieved the loss of them deeply. If we had lost our first child, it would have been very challenging for me to go there emotionally with my wife, to really feel what she was feeling. And I wanted women to hear that perspective because I think this dad had a reference point to what was lost that I think a lot of dads don't, especially if they don't have any living children. And so I think it'd be really hard. It's hard for men to quantify what they've lost if they don't have a reference point. And I think their relationship with his wife following the miscarriage would have looked substantially different if he didn't have that reference point. And so men are not heartless. They feel feelings. I know that's true. I just think they feel them differently and they maybe have a harder time maybe explaining them sometimes. And so, Jason, my question for you is what are some of those key differences between men and women just simply because of the way we're wired, like biologically? How do those differences often manifest when couples kind of experience a loss together? Just like what do men naturally gravitate towards or women naturally gravitate towards? Just kind of the key differences between just the way we're made.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of men, we look to what we can do, not what we feel. So if we
Mhm.
approach a situation that's difficult, we're not usually thinking, what do I feel about this? We're thinking, what do I do about this?
Mm.
So in this situation, it's really tricky because there really isn't a thing to do. And
Yeah.
so I think that sends a lot of men reeling because it's kind of like, well, I know how to fix things if I know what to fix, but I
Mhm.
can't. And
Yeah.
so then I'm just stuck with what I feel. And maybe I haven't felt a lot of things deeply. And so I'm not even really great at the language around that or talking about it. And so a lot of men will kind of pull back
Yeah.
instead of leaning in. Whereas a lot of women, they have a lot better experience talking about their feelings.
Yeah.
They're kind of able to say, well, this is what's going on inside me and I can talk about it. And when they do that, they have connection. But a lot of
Mhm.
men don't share that. And so, what we have to kind of do is understand there's differences. I think the other thing is to have real communication about how we're doing it differently and to understand that different doesn't mean it doesn't happen or it doesn't mean
Yeah.
we're not both grieving,
Yeah.
but it looks very different. I know, as a man and, I'm a therapist, but believe it or not, I haven't always been a therapist. So,
Right.
emotions have not always been my primary thing. And so, going through our miscarriages, I just remember a profound feeling of both helplessness
Yeah.
and uncertainty about what I was supposed to do.
Right.
And so with feeling, helpless and uncertain, what I did instead is I just leaned back because I just kind of
Mm.
thought at the very least I could just not make it worse.
Right.
And I think a lot of men approach miscarriages and loss this way with that same mentality of, okay, I don't know what to do. So at the very least, I should just not make it worse.
Yeah. I'm I can't help but think back to my experience and my husband, and he just did the exact same thing. And it's really sweet to think of him in that way. We've always, processed differently, and I've always given him a lot of grace and just like, okay, I understand you're not going to feel the same way about this as I am. For a while, it took me a long time to get there. There was definitely moments where I'm like, do you even care? Is this even impacting you at all? I think that's kind of going back to what the other dad shared is like they don't have that connection that the mom has. Um, and even if they do have some sort of connection before the baby's born, it's still different because the mom is experiencing it, physically, all the things. But yeah, that's kind of sweet and funny to think about my husband just thinking, sitting there like, I just want to make it worse. That's so real. I think too, I don't always want to like focus on the fact that, men and women process differently because I think there's a lot of really good things that can come out of two people going through something together, but in a much different way. How can you almost leverage that in your relationship to acknowledge this person has strengths in this area that I don't have, and vice versa? Um, maybe some I don't know. I'm just trying to like expand on the fact that it may not be a bad thing that you and your spouse or your partner are processing this completely different. Like, how could that benefit their relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great thing if you let it be. The
Mhm.
thing is we often, maybe it's God's sense of humor, but we often pick someone different than us. So we have
Mhm.
some things that are very similar, and then we have some big differences. And there's something in our heart that makes us go wild and just go, they're so much different than me. I love this about them.
Mhm.
And then we go through a hard season and we're like, they're so much differently.
I
And so
hate
it's like,
this.
yeah, we were kind of like, I don't like it anymore. And so I mean, I think the good news is the places you need to grow, the person who could teach you the most about how to grow in those places is probably sitting across from you.
Yeah.
And they'll teach you if you let them.
Yeah.
But to let them, you have to be willing to acknowledge where you're strong, where you struggle, and then you
Mhm.
have to be open to a new perspective. And
Yeah.
so the couples that I see, and I know what's been true in my marriage, is like the couples that rebound from grief and loss and difficulty, the ones that do that best, number one, they have a shared narrative about what happened, right? And it
Yeah.
happened to us. It didn't just happen to one of us, it happened to us. They have a shared
Right.
story, and then they let each other take the lead when they should lead.
Yeah.
Because some people are going to know how to do things better than the others. And so there's an art to saying, hey, I think you have this part and I've got that part.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that. I think, something that I wish I would have done differently, hindsight's 2020, is just that kind of like, do you even care? Just like assuming what my husband was thinking or feeling. And I feel like assumptions are just a fast track to disaster. And so just making sure, even if it feels awkward or even if it feels painful, like you have to somewhat get on the same page. Otherwise, this is just not. I think you might know the statistic, Jason, but I think it's like over half of marriages end after the loss of a baby. Like it's such a profound loss. And that might be different versus like miscarriage or like a stillbirth or a loss of a, living child. But it's still the loss of a child is a loss unlike any other. And it's like I think of other losses in our life, like a grandparent or something. That is completely different than when you both lost the same thing, but feel completely like different about the experience. Like it's truly one of the most unique kind of losses. Um, what what do you said the couples you see rebound better than others or just primarily open communication. But I think something that's really important to acknowledge is for me, sometimes my husband wasn't my person for this.
Mm.
And I think not expecting them to be. And so I think for me, I've accepted it's been over 11 years since my first loss. And it took me a while to realize, he doesn't understand this. How could I expect him to understand, my own experience? And so, what are some other paths that people can take? Obviously, therapy. But I think for me, it's been really helpful to just find other women who've also been through it. But how do you kind of communicate to your spouse, like, we went through this together, but I feel differently. And so this is my person for this, just without hurting their feelings. Cause I don't like if speaking to a mom, like I wouldn't want my husband to feel like I don't need him. You know what I mean? Like I don't want him to feel like I don't need you in this, but how maybe some ways that we can just clearly communicate to them, like, I really need you, but not for this section. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but I want to make sure that, women know that their spouse can be there for them, but also if they're not their person, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just said it so well, honestly.
Yeah. Okay,
That
good.
that's a really good word. It's I think anytime that we expect our partner to be everything to us, we're going to
Yeah.
end up disappointed at the least. And so they're not going to get it the way you get it. Men, as much as we try, aren't going to get what it's like to be a potential mom or a mom to be and to lose a child like that. We're never going to get it. We can try really hard, but I think it would be unfair to say, hey, I completely understand what that's like. I
Right.
don't. And so I think we just have to have enough humility to kind of say, like, hey, I don't get it. I won't get it. And so if there's somebody who does that you can talk to and get help, you should.
Yeah.
Because I think again, if we kind of look at us as we're on the same team and we're a unit, what's best for you is also best for me. And so if that's what you need to be better, I want to encourage it, not prevent it.
Yeah. I love that. Just like expanding out a little bit. Like obviously the dynamic between a couple going through baby loss is complex. But I think something that we've heard from our community of moms is the interactions with their bigger circle, like their family, parents, friends, relatives. Um, and I think too, it's really important for me. Like, I don't ever want to pressure a mom. If she doesn't feel like she needs extra support, that's fine. But if you do, and you do open up to your sphere of your circle of people and you just don't get the support you need, um, how can they navigate those conversations? Because I think there have been many times in my journey where someone has said something so incredibly awful, and it's a relationship that I really value and that, like, I wanna stay in my life, but I'm like, "Dang, that really, really hurt." And so, just talking about the dynamics of, like, beyond our spouse or partner relationship, if a mom kind of opens herself up in that way and is hurt by someone close to her, I would love if you have, like, a um go-to line for that mom in that moment to protect herself, but also not do irreparable damage to that relationship, because I think a lot of moms just don't know what to say in that moment, and they're left feeling small, hurt, and they don't really know how to protect themselves in that moment.
Yeah, I think when we choose to open up, the mistake we often make is we wait too long. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like, hey, I'm struggling so much, I have to say something, and then it just kind of comes out like this tidal wave
Yeah.
of all the things. And what's true about everyone is we all have a different degree of capacity to handle emotional things.
Mhm.
And so what a lot of people do is they start with all of it and then they try to reel it back.
Yes,
So they go,
it's
I'm
so
going to tell
true.
you the whole thing. Oh man, that didn't land well. Let's pull it back. And so what I often talk to people about is go the opposite.
Mm.
Start small, work your way up. So if you're talking to that person and you speak a little more generally about the loss and they're receptive, dig in a little more. And
Mhm.
if they're receptive, dig in a little more and keep going until it's obvious that they're not sure what to do next.
Mm.
And then okay, well, that's what I can talk to them about. As opposed to doing the thing where we're like, I'm just going to share all of it and hope they can accommodate, because a lot of people can't.
Mhm.
And sometimes it activates things in people that we don't even know about. And so
Right.
sometimes the story we're telling becomes about them because it's a memory of something they went through.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to start slow, build your way up, and then to ask people if they're willing to help. And
Yeah.
I say willing because lots of people can help you but won't.
Yeah.
And so the better question is, are you willing to help? And
Wow.
if you're not willing to help, do you know who could?
Yeah. We were discussing this in a different episode of the series about people who are willing to get in the pit with you,
Mm-hmm.
not just like throw you a snack as you're down in the hole, but physically get down in there and sit with you. And there's some people who will get in the pit with you. There's some people that will throw you a snack and walk on by. And I love that. I think, I'm thinking of the mom listening to this and she's thinking, I shouldn't have to, and like I'm putting myself in her shoes of I shouldn't have to ask people if they wanna help me. Um, I think in this scenario, miscarriage, we don't want to happen to anyone, and so when it does happen to us, we're obviously a victim in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, h what would your message be to a mom who is, like, fresh in this, like, fresh in the grief? She's angry, she's upset, she's confused, she's just hurt by this experience, who's sitting there thinking, "I shouldn't have to do this. People should just know." People should just know what I need. What would you say to her?
That'd be amazing. That would be
Right.
so amazing if they did. I,
Yeah,
I'm totally with you. I don't disagree in the least. That would be so cool. And yet they don't.
they don't.
And so knowing, one of my favorite quotes is, Scott Peck says, mental health is commitment to reality at all costs.
Mm,
And so the reality is that it's just not how it works. It's a great
mhm.
dream. It's a good fantasy. It's just not how it works. And so the good news is if you tell people what you need and what you want, most of the
Yeah,
time they'll show up.
yeah,
So that's the great news is if you make it clear, most of the time people who love and care about you will show up in whatever ability they have. But what's almost guaranteed is if you expect them to guess, they won't.
right. Again, that danger of assumption, I think is so
Yeah.
true in all relationships.
Yeah. And but I think there's a very human need in that, which is I want to always be understood and seen, even in my
Yeah,
pain.
yeah,
And so that's not a bad thing. That's not a thing that we can expect from other people. It's a thing that happens occasionally, and it's beautiful when it does.
Mhm.
We just can't set expectations that that's how it's going to work.
Yeah. I think that's been so true for me. Like I said, my first loss was over 11 years ago, and at first, like, people didn't really show up for me because I wasn't really sharing what I needed. And literally just this year, my husband and I had a conversation because I felt unseen on the anniversary of our first loss. And I literally said to him, I said, I have never explicitly told you this is what I need on this day, and this is what I don't need on this day. I said, this is what I need from you. And I just told him. And so now, like, no pressure, honey. But if he doesn't show up in the way I need him to, no, I'm not holding him to that standard. But I think it's been 11 years, and this is my job, and I myself still hadn't explicitly told my husband what I needed. So how could I expect him to show up for me if he didn't know what I needed? And I think that's, you know, a lot of women will come to me and say, no one's really here for me. No one knows. And I always try to just so gently, gently encourage them, like, have you told anybody? People can't read minds. And I think the truth of it is, like, everybody's got their own stuff going on. And if they don't know, how are they going to show up for you?
Yeah, because if they haven't had the experience, they just legitimately don't get it. And
Right.
it's
And I
maybe
always say,
one
who we would
thing,
want them to understand.
yeah, because they're probably going to be bad guessers, right? And so,
Right.
what I would say I see a lot of times too that might be helpful is that I see a lot of times with females, when you kind of say, hey, what do you want? What do you need? A lot of women are like, no one's ever asked me that before.
Yeah.
I think lots of women and mothers and caretakers, they're like, I'm caring for everyone else. No,
Yeah.
little, like Jason, no one is asking what I want or need. So I'm out of practice.
Right.
And so I go, okay, well, you're allowed to be out of practice. But if we're going to work towards identifying what you want and need, maybe start with what you don't want and you don't
Yeah.
need.
Yeah.
Because
That's
sometimes
often
that's
easier.
easy, right? You're like,
Yeah.
let me tell you the 10 things I don't want you to do.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm unclear on what I really want or need, but I can start with what I don't want or need. And
Mhm.
even that helps people show up for you.
Yeah. I think that's kind of where I was at. Personally, just I knew exactly what I didn't need, but I never got to the point where this is what I do need. And I think too, just having grace for yourself, and I'm what your experience looks like if you had a miscarriage yesterday versus 10 years ago is going to look a lot different. And just, man, this is a lifetime of processing and a lifetime, journey of healing. And, moving forward every day is moving forward. And I think the conversations might look different or have more elevated emotions depending where you're at, but just knowing, like, just having grace for yourself and grace for those people in your life. And um, with that said, there are some relationships that end because of a loss, or are so badly damaged from what someone said. And so, if you could speak to that, like, how do you, for a mom who deserves to be protected in this scenario, how can she end a relationship without further making it difficult on herself? You know what I mean? Like, because I want a mom to be able to protect herself if it's clear this relationship is over. What does that look like? What does that conversation
So
look like?
meaning like a marriage or romantic relationship or
Um, yeah, I mean that, or even just like with a friend who said something really awful, and like, I think, how do you navigate if there's going to be a reconciliation there? So maybe break that down first. What does that conversation look like? Of, hey, you hurt me, now what? Or and then it becomes clear that there's no reconciliation to happen here. Then what?
yeah, I mean the first thing is does the other person know what happened? So
Right.
maybe they disagree, but do they even know the extent of which that hurt you or that impacted you? If they
Hmm.
don't, you have to make them aware.
Yeah.
And then you want to share with them what you'd want or need to fix it, if there is a thing you'd want or need to fix it.
Mm.
And then I would say you want to invite them to try to fix it. And if
Yeah.
that person is unwilling, the big word is willing, right? So if they kind of hear how it hurts you and they're unwilling to do anything about it, and it's clear that that's going to end the relationship, then that's going to end the relationship. And
Mm.
so what I tell people is give people clarity about how to fix it, invite them along to try to fix it, and then respect if they don't.
Yeah.
And if they don't, we just sort of say, well, here's kind of the way that you'd get back into relationship with me if you ever decide you're willing.
Yeah. Just kind of
And if
leaving
you're
that
not, I'll
up to
respect it.
them.
yeah, I care about you. I love relationship, but I can't make you do something you don't want to do.
Hmm. I think
And so
it,
I'll sit with it.
yeah, I think that's really dependent on another person having a lot of self-awareness, which is a gamble.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes these things, I mean, what is really true is that a lot of times a significant loss or rupture can ruin a relationship because what it does is it amplifies an existing problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason, marriages don't work after some of this, and the reason friendships don't work after some of this, is because in the face of crisis, problems that were already existing are amplified.
Yeah.
And so what we see is, if a person was already mature and connected and relational, they're probably more mature and more connected and more relational.
Hmm.
But if it was already struggling, that struggle is just 10 times.
Yeah.
And so what I say to people is, number one, you're already in crisis, you don't need to make more. So you have to
Yeah.
be really choosy about what conversations need to be had now and which
Hmm.
ones don't. A lot of times they don't need to be had now, but sometimes they might.
Yeah.
And then when you have that conversation, I think explain, how it impacted you, tell people what you need and want, and then ask them and invite them to show up. And if they don't, I think stop trying to convince people to do the right thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's hard.
I think some of our biggest wounds are from trying to convince someone to do what they know they should do but won't.
Mm. That's just life in a nutshell. Oh
It's
man.
true. It's true. And we've all been on either side of that.
Yeah.
And so I think if someone is unwilling, you go, I care about you enough to respect that that's your choice. I don't like it. I
Hmm.
wish you'd change your mind. But what I'm asking for probably isn't going to be different.
Yeah. I love that. And maybe you can choose to open about this or not, but in your personal experience with, you and your wife and your losses, and also people that you help, like if there's a relationship that needs protecting, like I know we've kind of talked about, like number one thing you'd tell them, do this and you will make it through this.
Meaning how to protect that relationship throughout
Yeah.
this and after. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you need shared meaning about what happened and what you're going to do with it.
Hmm.
And so what that means is, for some couples, you both experience a loss, but the mom might experience a loss with the narrative, if I was a better, healthier mother, I would have been able to carry this baby to term.
Yeah.
And the father might say, if I was healthier and a better dad, I could have we could have had a sustainable childbirth. And so we have two conflicting stories about what happened.
Yep.
And so as long as we don't agree on the story about what happened and the meaning, we have a lifelong problem,
Yeah.
which is to say, this didn't happen to us, it happened to you and it happened to me.
Yeah. Yikes.
and
Hmm.
and that right there is often the core of a lot of problems couples have.
Hmm.
And so as we went through this, and I don't know if this is a weird therapist thing, but like my wife and I literally had a conversation of, what is the narrative we have about what happened? Because
Hmm.
I know what I think happened, and she's like, I know what I think happened, and neither one were filled with much grace, right? Both of them were
Right.
like, ooh, that doesn't sound very nice.
Yeah.
And so we're like, what do we call this? And then how do we honor that that's the narrative about this for us?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because when we have that shared meaning of a difficult experience, we can grieve it together as opposed to separately.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I think we make up a lot of stories in our head about what happened, and a lot of times those stories never come out of our head, and they're just sitting on repeat. And then your spouse, the person you're closest to, is telling a completely different story on repeat in their head. Oh man, it's so hard. It's so hard. And I think too, the factor of, I thought this many times, like, I'm crazy. I'm crazy for feeling this so deeply. I'm crazy for still being sad about this. I'm crazy for making this such a big deal, um, which none of that is true. But I think sometimes when you just get in your head, those thoughts can swirl, and just the power of like getting it out and getting it out to your person. Um, and just, I mean, literally just shining light on lies. What could, like, going to like a therapist, obviously, this is a chance to brag on yourself and your profession, Jason. Like the
Sure.
power of talking to your spouse just one on one and like doing your best. what could a therapist bring to that conversation that you maybe wouldn't have access to just one on one?
Yeah, I mean, I think whether it's a therapist or mentor or friend with some experience, I mean, you can kind of pick whoever you want with that, and everyone's going to have different, experience and specialty. But I think what I see that's so helpful for people is the ability to sort of untangle the mess of thoughts in your brain.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's hard to do with our spouse because some of the things we're thinking might not be helpful to them or could even be hurtful, and we're
Mhm.
not really sure. And so sometimes we need a place where we can kind of go, like, lay out all the puzzle pieces
Mhm.
and say to somebody else, help me put this together into something coherent, because
Yeah.
I don't know how to make sense of it. And so I think sometimes that ability to do that with someone reduces the load and the pressure on the marriage,
Yeah.
because not a lot of people can do that and be objective at the same time.
So, Jason, the mission of Evermore Blooms is to care for women who've experienced miscarriage. And one of the main ways we do that is by sending her a bouquet of flowers on either the anniversary of her loss or what would have been her due date. So, just for fun, I would love for you to share. You're going to have to share some feelings here or, experience the most impactful memory you have surrounding flowers. Just trying to paint the picture here for people that flowers really do make a difference. So, I'd love if you'd share a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a guy, so I'm not sure flowers have played like a huge role in my life.
For you personally, or maybe you gave flowers to someone, whatever it may be.
Well, all of the above. I mean, all the above. So whenever I work with someone and they come do an intensive, we get a big bouquet of flowers, and so that's a thing that I do here because I think those are just good reminders of a lot of things that are true in life.
Yeah.
Which is there are seasons where we bloom, and there's seasons where we wilt, and there's seasons where we need nurture, and so that to me has been meaningful. I think a memory for me is grieving some losses with bringing flowers to that
Mhm.
place. And
Mhm.
I think what's beautiful about it is it really is a signal, and it's something that we can put our feelings into. The people that I see work through this stuff, that get through it, I think, and are better for it, are often people who have a symbol of the
Mm.
loss. and
Mhm.
and so I think flowers can be that symbol.
Mhm.
But if our loss isn't symbolic in some way, it's hard to know what to grieve.
Yeah.
And I think especially if we're grieving a pregnancy that wasn't, there's maybe not a whole lot of
Not a lot to
tangible
hold on
things we
to.
could
Yeah.
look to. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so whatever that symbol is, I think it could be flowers or anything else. It helps us to kind of put our feelings in a certain place.
Yeah. That's the perfect answer. You
That's
win.
what I was
That
going
was
for.
so
That's what I was
good.
going for. Great. I
That's
wanted to
great.
get it perfect.
You did great. Well, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, and just thank you to everyone who watched and listened. I hope this was helpful. And yeah, I think it's so important to know that there's help out there. People like Jason, or a mentor, or someone in your life. You do not have to walk this alone. So thank you for listening. I pray this conversation helped you through your journey.